let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, everyone, really glad that you're here for Connect the Dots episode 3. This has been a really fun test for me to do these live streams and also use them as a way to test thinking about what I might do for a podcast. And what I'm going to be working on, what I'm going to be sharing with you today, the way that these podcasts would work is a little bit different than a regular YouTube video, because with the YouTube video, I'm obviously a lot more visual. These podcasts will be a lot more like live stream ideas and like me and you kind of connecting over this live stream medium. No like switching back and forth, no real. What I'm thinking about for this isn't necessarily about showing you as much. That's what more for the YouTube videos are. And some of the courses, a lot of the courses are more of the show and tell. This is going to be a lot more of a conversation. So one thing that I'm really excited about that you saw in the email yesterday, and again, if you're not on the email list, just go to mattragland.com/thinkers and you can get dialed in. Make sure you know everything about new videos, new courses, discounts, coaching opportunities, different articles that are coming out, and just things that I don't really share even on the YouTube channel that you will get extra access to, like this book that has really been blowing my mind. And you wouldn't think if you just grabbed it, and I have it on Kindle, so I can't like show it to you, but it's this book called How to Take Smart Notes. And there are a couple of people that I follow that I think very highly of in terms of their productivity and the way that they write and the way that they think about things. And so when I saw these two people, Tiago Forte and Nat Eliason, both refer to this book called How to Take Smart Notes, I was like, oh, this is super interesting. I'm going to dive into this a little bit more. So I've been reading it over the past week, and it really has turned my notion of note taking completely on its head, whichever metaphor fits best. Because I've always considered myself a really solid note taker, that I've always been someone who has written things down, that's made highlights, has underlined, written in the margins of books. But what I realized, much to my chagrin, and I would wonder if you think the same thing about this, is that often these highlights, these underlines, these notes in the margins, these ideas that are like scribbled into, a field notes or a bullet journal, what becomes of those notes? What becomes of those ideas? How useful are they to me in the future? And if I was being honest with myself and with you, the answer is that they're not that useful to me. I don't make much use of them going forward. And that, as someone who likes to think, likes to believe, and wants to be building this like reservoir, this second brain, to use Tiago's term, a personal wiki of knowledge that I can deploy at any time, that kind of bums me out. Like there might be something specific or important that I read in a book, but then I realize that I really only just think about those things in the context that they might come up to me in the moment. It's not like it's something that like I'm actively researching. I'm just thinking about like this line. Like I always really liked this quote from Essentialism, another great book by Greg McKeown. And it's like, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. It's been a very good, very important quote for me, but it just kind of pops into my head. I don't like actively go like grab it somewhere. So I realized after reading How to Take Smart Notes that what I've been doing for pretty much my entire life up to this point is taking what the author, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Sonke Ahrens, I think is something like that. But I realized I'm just going to call him the author at this point. I was doing for basically my entire life something that the author calls taking fleeting notes, which are great to take. It's a perfect starting point because you're thinking about like ideas, thoughts, whatever it might be. And You're just making a fleeting note on, it could be a notebook, it could be a note card, it could be your bullet journal, it could be an app on your phone, it could be, a napkin or a scrap of paper. Where some of the, like, I'm realizing now the real work is happening is in this process of reviewing, distilling, and creating more of a durable note. And so instead of fast note taking, you're taking the time to make a great note. So instead of just taking notes, you're actually making durable, permanent notes. And the idea with this is that a durable or permanent note is something that, even as like a single note card, a single sheet of paper, this is an idea, this is a note that can be used almost like a Lego block in any other kind of creative, professional, even personal output that it's related to in the future. And when I thought about this, I mean, really, I felt like there was a light bulb that went off over my head when I realized this, is that when you take like your fleeting or fast notes and you turn them into something, not every note, I'll come back to that in a second, but you turn the best ones, the ones that make a lot of sense to you, the ones that you can refer back to, you can add, like resources, references, almost bibliographic detail to. These become the notes, the durable, permanent notes that form the Lego blocks of future projects. And I was like, oh my gosh. Because think about it. Think about it with me. How often do you begin a creative project? Let's just take an example of, like, say, a blog post. And you're like, okay, well, I want to like write about this thing. Like, let's say I wanted to write about, productivity or note taking, let's say. And the where most of us, a lot of us have a lot of trouble right from the beginning, because you're faced with that blank page. Like, well, what am I going to write about? Okay, let me go do some research. Let me read a bunch of stuff and see what stands out. And like, okay, I'll take it from that source, and I'll take it from that source. And oh, I had this idea in the moment, and so I'm going to write that down as well. But everything happens at the same time. And that's pretty much how I've always worked. Where if instead I've begun to create this system of taking notes and having them in context in the right place, which is a whole other discussion. Like, that's that's a big part of the real work, I would say. But what if instead, when I went to create like an article or a video or a podcast or any piece of content about note taking specifically, or maybe something about time blocking, time tracking, time management, what if instead of like doing all the work like right at that moment, and just kind of putting something out there because it was all that I could find in the time that I had to publish the piece of content, instead of doing it all at that same time, instead I just go into my notes and I look for notes that are tagged or sourced or linked between with like those keywords, like whether it's note taking, time management, time blocking, time tracking. And instead of like trying to ideate and brainstorm and research and write and do all of that at the same time, what if instead it was almost like assembling Lego blocks? Like, you think about, like, I have a 5-year-old and he is really into Legos right now. So we do a lot of building together. And it's cool because, like, if he wants to build something, you think about this, if you have like pretty organized Legos, you think about, like, okay, I would like to build a ship. And instead of like having this giant, instead of having like, well, no Legos kind of sucks. But instead of having like this giant bin, if you have like kind of an organized Lego set and you go through and you think like, okay, I just need like these particular pieces. I just got to look through and I got to see what fits best. Like, oh, I don't really like the design of that one. I'd rather see something like this. That is when I think things get really, really exciting, because of, instead of doing everything from the blank page, starting from scratch and doing all that like work, for a lack of a better term, you've already done the work of like putting together your notes and ideas on different subjects, keywords, and notes, again, notes, ideas. And so when it comes to the like act of creating and publishing great work, all you're doing is looking at your notes and you're just assembling those different ideas like Lego blocks. Like, this one fits, this one doesn't. I actually like how this one works a little bit more. For those of you that have maybe seen the Lego movie, it's this, idea of a master builder. And what happens is they kind of like they just start grabbing like Legos from everywhere, and whatever it is, they're just like assembling it in real time, but they already have access to everything. So let me know what you think about this, because I find it incredibly exciting. I think Andrew Malloy is making a couple of comments about this. I want to say that we did a whole hour-long training about this in the group coaching program, and it was everyone. I think it's fair to say it was everyone's favorite lesson of the program so far. And we spent an hour on this. I showed specific examples, things that are a little tough to do on a YouTube video. I'm going to do a video about note taking very, very soon. But when it comes to like the nitty gritty details of everything, we spent an hour, almost an hour and a half kind of going through this. And everyone said it was their favorite, most impactful, like most actionable lesson that they had from the entire program. So that was really exciting to see. I think Andrew made a couple of notes about this. I'm going to look through the chat in a few minutes, but a couple other things that I want to make a point about. One is that like the most important thing on this, at least from a beginning stage, I think there are two really big important points. One is that you need to get in the practice, in the habit of taking fast notes, or like what the author calls fleeting notes. And that is just getting the initial spark of the idea down, even if you don't necessarily write down like an entire quote or a fully formed idea just yet, depending on the time that you have, making sure that you're taking lots of notes. Now, the next part of this is, and this is the second most important point, is that you're making time to go back through your notes, your highlights, your underlines, all of those things in a more like analytical way to decide, is this something that I want to expand on, or is this something that I can just like set aside? Okay. So you're deciding like how much further you're going to take this note. And when you decide that something that is a fleeting note or a fast note, something that you might just jot down in your field notes or your bullet journal, that's when you start to put in more work to making it a durable, permanent note. And so I might, and I have this already kind of written down, but I had a fleeting note talking as I was in the past thinking about note taking. But Ryan Holiday, an author, one of my favorite writers, he has a note card method kind of similar to this for how he writes books. And so I just made that as a fleeting note. And then I went now I use for my permanent notes, I've been practicing more and more with using Roam for this, Roam Research, because I do like when it comes to like the end result of this, I'm probably going to use a digital system just because it's so much easier to search through than a bunch of different actual notebooks. But then I went in and I showed this in the group mastermind. I went in and I created like a whole entry for how Ryan Holiday uses note cards to organize his book. So this is now tagged with productivity and writing and note taking. And that becomes now a more durable note. So when I'm putting together like this, this live stream, and I'm gathering different notes and ideas for what I want to talk about, I like see this one. I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense to share. So I put that into my outline. So I know there are a lot of questions in the chat. This is a really larger topic. And like I said, I am going to do a video about this. I'll also say that the fall coaching mastermind program is going to start in a few weeks. And this is something we're going to be spending a lot of time on. So if you want to know more about this, you can I think probably the best thing is just to email me, Matt@mattragland.com. if you're on the email list already, which you can sign up for at mattragland.com/thinkers, they're going to be the ones that know about availability for the program first. But about half of the spots are already taken by current members. So we probably only have about 10 left for the fall. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you email me, matt@mattragland.com, or get onto the email list. mattragland.com/thinkers is the best place to do that right now. The final thought that I want to leave you with before we look a little bit at some of the questions is like 2 directions that you can take an initial capture of a note. Now, what I would think about doing is what we've already talked about with this idea of a note that you take and expanding it out to a more durable, permanent note or idea that you can find later on, that you can use as a resource or a reference point. Okay, so that is coming from you and expanding out to like a more permanent, durable note. You can also think about it in the inverse. If you have a really big piece of content, whether it's a book, a blog post, a video, a seminar, anything like that. So a really big piece of content that isn't yours, your job at that point is the opposite. It's to take that huge chunk of content, really, really big and wide, top of the funnel almost, and bring it in and summarize it to those most compelling, clear points and arguments and ideas that you can then, again, turn into permanent, durable notes and ideas for your future reference and use. Okay, let's see some of the questions in the chat. Thank you for being so active in this. Let me go ahead and try and change my, I have to stand up. So let me go ahead and change, there we go. This will make it easier for me to see the actual chat instead of like reaching for it. All right, so just going from the bottom here, we'll take questions for a few minutes and then hop in. Let's see. Yeah, so Kathleen, the idea of intentionally reviewing it later is interesting. That's really important, the intentional review. The author says to do it within 48 hours. So let's just say a couple of days, because if you review it after that, then it's likely that kind of the nugget of a thought, the context for it will be a little lost at that point. So you want to do it as soon as possible. Let's see. Also saying, always see note taking is just breaking down whatever idea or topic is being presented. Typically only reference later if I happen to think about it. Yeah, so you want to think about it, kind of back from, if it's someone else's idea, then you're kind of contracting it down to those like little points, those main ideas that you're taking from the broader content of someone else. But if it's an idea from you, like a little spark of an idea, then you want to think about, how can I expand that out to something that is like more specific and has like a broader impact, or just is like a more fully fleshed out idea. Let's see. So Jen is asking, how do you tag your notes so you can easily find topics later? So I am just using, since I'm using Roam for like the durable, like easily referenced portion, I'm just using the tags in Roam. So you can do that either with pages or like with actual like hashtags in Roam. And I would do things like, productivity, if it's related to something with content or coaching, YouTube, those tags just get thrown in. And so then if I'm working on something specific to YouTube, I'll filter all of my notes in Roam to say, only show me the notes that have the YouTube tag. And that can help as well. But it's something that I'm still developing as well. So it is a work in progress, but it's something that is just completely like blowing my mind for how impactful it could be. Roam versus writing on paper, which would you suggest? I mean, either one can work. But what I often do personally is I'll make my initial like fast or fleeting capture on on paper, But then when I like build out the more permanent, durable note, that will go into Roam. And sometimes I do some quick capture in Roam as well. It's just if I'm at my computer, then oftentimes I'll write that in Roam. But if I'm not, then I won't. Okay, a couple times for questions, if you have any, and then we will take off. Yeah, so Sally, and I've seen a lot of people talking about this with like, I'm a mess with note taking, having trouble with it, just staying consistent. Like we've talked about a lot of times, make sure that the first thing that you focus on is the habit. And so that note taking, don't worry as much. Don't worry as much about like, what should this be tagged? What context is it going to go in? I would encourage you to be really focused on the habit of taking notes. And kind of like 1A with that is to make sure that you are taking some time to review, even if it's just to review the fast notes that you've taken over the past few days and be like, I don't want to turn any of these into like more fleshed out ideas. But just making that habit to review will be really effective, because that is the piece that I realized for years that I hadn't done a very good job with, is like, instead of just highlighting books or just writing notes in the margins or anything like that, it was that like taking those notes, ideas, highlights, and turning them into something that could stand on its own. Like, that's the big part of it. Creating a note that can stand on its own, that could be something that you look at and be like, I know what this is for, instead of being like, why did I write down in my notebook, what is the lens you filter information through, the worldview you communicate? I mean, that's a nice question. It's an interesting question, but already I'm kind of forgetting why I wrote that down or what context it was in. So that could also just be an example of like, okay, that's a nice question, but it's not an idea that I'm going to flesh out anymore at this time. Okay, last question. And this is a really common one just in general. How do you handle personal notes versus work notes? Do you keep them in the same place, or do you separate them somehow? I keep them in the same place. They might be tagged differently, or if we're doing all paper, they might be organized a little differently. But I just keep them in the same place. Like if it's Roam, then that makes sense to keep them all in the same place. It's just in Roam with different tags or pages. And if it's personal, then I would, if I was going all paper on this, then I would just be buying these like note cards in bulk, like literally probably thousands at a time, because it's on these that like your more fully fleshed out idea would live in. And then I just have like maybe a different box that family or personal ones would go into. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, if you have any specific questions on this, feel free to email me, matt@mattragland.com. You can drop them in the comments below this as well. Probably the comments are going to be best. If you're interested in being a part of the fall mastermind kind of group coaching program that's going to be starting in a few weeks, make sure that you are on the email list, mattragland.com/thinkers. It's going to be one-on-one personal growth calls, personal productivity calls. It's going to be group coaching. It's going to be expert calls with people like Tiago Forte. He was a guest in the summer and did just an amazing job. So many people that are really good to connect with. I'm going to put you in touch with them and in the same Zoom room as them. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you let me know. There's only, I said, probably about 10 spots left for the fall, but I would love to have you be a part of it if it is a good fit. Thank you so much for watching this. Be on the lookout for a new, like normal YouTube video next week, and I will see you then. Thanks so much, everyone.